Jesus tells many parables in Matthew that all give different ideas. In chapter 13, we see him give multiple different, seemingly random parables. However, these are not random. Not only is there a common theme, but there's also consistent repetition. It's pretty obvious that there's a message on the kingdom of heaven, as it's mentioned 7 times, while just kingdom is mentioned 9 times. Jesus is talking about the people when he says this, and about the good news reaching the people. Therefore, we can deduce that the main theme is about the results of receiving the gospel. Parable 1 involves a harvest of wheat. At some point, an enemy has planted weeds among the crop, but the farmer does not immediately uproot them, since doing so might also uproot the good plants. Instead, he lets them grow together until harvest. The ending shows the good being rewarded by being brought to the barn, while the bad gets burned. If we receive the gospel, our reward is heaven. Second, he talks about how a tiny mustard seed grows to be the biggest tree. This shows how the good news can enter our lives and change us to become much better than we ever could have imagined. If we remain in him, we will become strong, not through our own means, but by the rains and nutrients that he puts into our lives. Third is a statement about how yeast will permeate all throughout the bread that is mixed into. Nice, soft bread is absolutely delicious, but without yeast, the bread stays hard and less pleasant. Jesus is saying that if we accept his teachings, we will become gentler and more enjoyable people. He will replace our hearts of stone for a fresh new one. Following that explanation, Jesus kicks back into a fourth parable. He speaks of a man who found a treasure in a field that leads him to sell everything he owns to buy that field in order to get the prize. Jesus is talking about how we should love him so much that we shouldn't care about leaving everything else behind to follow him, should I come to that. The fifth parable is also similar, but instead of a random man, it's a merchant, and he's trying to get a pearl of choice. He sells everything he has in order to receive it once it's found. Once again, this shows how much more we should desire what Jesus has to offer. The last parable is about soaring between good and bad fish. It follows the same format as parable 1, where both fish are brought in, one to be kept and the other to be destroyed. Jesus concludes with a seemingly random statement about how a teacher who becomes his disciple is like the owner of a house who brings out old and new treasures from his storehouse. This is a bit confusing, but if we look at it, we can see how this is a chiasm that compares the old law and the new gospel and bringing it together through Jesus. Jesus' entire story as well is a form of chiasm. His first and last stories are not only more in-depth than the other 4, but they also mention consequences while the rest don't. Jesus only explains the first parable while he asks if his disciples understand by the last one, which they do. Jesus' purpose is to not only illustrate how good the message he teaches is, but to also show what it does in our lives, ending with our reward. He tells the story of what the gospel does in one's life. If we look at it according to the chiasm, we see, from the middle to the outside, a story about how one finds the treasure of the gospel. So, they give up everything else to follow it. As they allow it to permeate in their lives, they not only get built up, but it also makes them better. They become fruitful in a world of unfruitfulness, which ends with them being rewarded and rewarding others.